Hello, hello, hello there. This is your girl, Valerie Mason Chase. And as you can see, I am flying solo tonight. We had planned for the Cookie Man to be with us this evening, but he couldn't make it, so it's just me. But we'll be all right. So anyhow, what we're going to talk about tonight, it is a subject that I dare say impacts everyone because you either have a child who is in school or about to start school, or you know someone who has a child. You may have a niece, you may have a nephew, a cousin, a grandchild, but in some way, shape, or form, each and every one of us is either impacted by or has been impacted by one of our children being in school. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about education and about parental involvement. There's several subjects. A couple of them might be so-called hot button topics, but we don't shy away from that here in this space. And so I want to bring on two very, very special guests because education is not my expertise. I got one, but I don't know a whole lot about it, okay? Nursing, counseling, that's my area. But when it comes to education, I've got to bring on the big dogs. I have to bring them on and let them address these issues. And looks like I just lost Rachel, but hopefully she'll come back. So the first person I'm going to bring on is a sister friend of mine. And here she is. I'm going to bring her on right now. Eliza Mateo. Hey, Eliza.
Hey, how are you?
I am doing so well, and I want to thank you for taking the time and joining us this evening. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read Eliza's bio. So this way you'll get to know who she is, okay? Eliza Mateo, she is an ordained minister, and she's under the leadership of Pastors DJ and Pastor Lafrida Yarborough of Heart of Worship Church that's located in East Orange, New Jersey. Eliza is passionate. She's a passionate teacher in the Jersey City Public Schools, and she's also one of the teachers in the children's ministry at her church. And Miss Eliza is a published author. She actually has 3 books, and we're going to talk about them later. Eliza says that she has always worked with children of all ages, from a young teenager up until today. Eliza says you could find her tutoring her neighbors and even tutoring her college classmates. It was something which always came naturally to her, even though she says that she tried to run from teaching quite a bit. Eliza holds a P3 standard, and you can tell me what that is later, because like I said, I don't know about education. You can tell me about it. And she holds it through the New Jersey City University, and Eliza has been a teacher since 2015. However, she started out as a teaching assistant in 2007. She says that her journey to teaching began back in 2003, 2004. She was a mother on welfare. I'm going to just mute right there. Eliza said she was a mother on welfare, struggling to provide for her son. At the time, she had 1 child. And what happened is Eliza volunteered at her son's school out of what she thought was convenience, but she found herself intrigued at how children learned. This caused her to take full advantage of the welfare program, and she went back to school. She attended school for her CDA. Again, you're going to tell me what that is. And then went on to college to further her career. In 2010, Eliza was going to college full-time. She was working full-time, taking care of 3 children, raising 3 children on her own, as well as caring for her father, who was ill at the time. But by the grace of God, she didn't just graduate. She graduated summa cum laude in 2014 at St. Peter's University. She currently holds her bachelor's degree in urban studies as well as elementary education with a minor in women's studies. Oh, you know what? Somebody might be making comments. Let me turn that on. Eliza says it's through years of teaching, being a mom, and working in the children's ministry at her church where she learned the importance of both communication and parental involvement. One thing she said she strives to do as an educator is to keep parents involved and keep open lines of communication. Wow, wow, wow. Eliza, that's a lot. And I commend you. I applaud you because it sounds like at one point your life looked very differently than the way it looks right now.
Yes, yes, definitely. It was a struggle. And one thing I forgot to include back then at that time when I was going to school, at the time I was married. So I don't want to, discredit anybody, but, at the time, my kid's father, he did help me, as far as like taking care of the kids, but still being a mom does not stop. So I was also a wife. I was, being a wife as well. And we know that takes work. And so,
there's your
so, it was so challenging. And like I said, it was nobody but the grace of God. Like when I look back now, I'm like, oh, it was nobody but God. To have all of that on my plate and still graduate with the highest honors.
Yes.
Nobody but God. Nobody but God.
I agree with you 1000%. So our next dynamo that I'm going to bring on, Miss Rachel Baker. Let me bring Rachel on. Hey, Rachel.
Hello.
Rachel, good evening. And thanks again for taking the time to join us and share from your experience as well as from your expertise. So I'm going to read a little bit about Ms. Rachel Baker. Ms. Rachel Baker, she is a licensed social worker, youth organizer, and a classroom teacher. Rachel believes that all students are wildly capable of learning and developing with power and purpose. With 20 years of practical experience working across a diverse range of educational spaces, including public and charter schools, nonprofit groups, therapeutic centers, and behavioral support facilities, Rachel brings a unique perspective to the art of effectively implementing and communicating strategies for behavioral support. Rachel works within schools and with school leaders to demonstrate meaningful alternatives to punitive discipline policies. I think that's great. By understanding genuine student engagement, building trusting relationships, and supporting culture within the context of those trusting relationships, Rachel aims to walk with both youth and educators in the direction of their common goals. Rachel is the author of the book, The Empower Program, K through 2, Concrete Strategies for Positive Behavioral Support, published in 2016. And she presents her strengths-based yet practical methods for supporting youth while struggling with behavioral, social, and self-regulation skills for teachers, parents, and other professionals in highly engaging workshops. Rachel currently works at KAPS, K-A-P-S Academy, which is a therapeutic setting for K through 12 behavioral support, as a high school history teacher and intervention specialist. Oh, I tell you, when I told y'all that I had two dynamos on tonight who not only know how to talk, but they both walk the walk. And I am so honored. That I have the two of you here to share with us on this evening. So we are going to dive right in. And those of you who are watching, first, let me just welcome you all here, whether you're watching live now or whether you're watching the replay. I encourage you, if you have not already done so, to subscribe to the YouTube channel, to like, to share, to spread the word. Because as I said, this is something that impacts all of us. And I also encourage you, if you have questions, if you have comments, join the conversation and make this as interactive as possible and show some love and support for our guests on this evening. So, Rachel and Eliza, we know that most structured learning takes place within school walls. Some, including myself, believe that parents or whomever might be a child's primary caregiver, that is their first teacher. How important do you believe it is to begin a child's education as early as possible? And what are the advantages, if any? And either one of you can feel free to jump in at any time. Don't be polite. Just
I believe the earlier the better, but what I always told a lot of my parents, because when I had worked in a school in Jersey City, I used to work at a place called Concordia Learning Center at St. Joseph School for the Blind. So the St. Joseph School for the Blind housed an Abbott program with 3-year-olds, and we consisted of probably 98% Indian, which they're very much about education. And so I explained to them the foundational skills are great, yes, but when we talk about the social emotional aspect, the problem solving techniques, that's what's most important. Like a child can come in knowing, wrote their ABCs, their numbers, but if they don't even have the ability to zip up their pants, then those are the foundational skills that we want to teach them. So I would always emphasize, listen, you have to allow your child to be able to pull up their pants. We stress the importance of that because when they're able to do that, it helps them with their fine motor skills as far as writing, right? I see Rachel's like, yes, yes. So I know for me as an educator and kind of tapping into that field, I would definitely say I have like 10 plus years experience in doing that. And just to see a lot of parents, pressing, they want them to know their ABCs. All of those are great and they're going to come. But we are as teachers of young children, we want to develop those skills at a young age, because when they get older, these are life skills that they're going to need for the rest of their life.
Yes. That's good. That's good.
I completely agree with everything that Eliza said. And I would also add that, to Eliza's point, just kind of like being compassionate and empowering a student, like a child's want to engage in the learning process. I think a lot of people and parents fear that it starts in school, or it's got to be, within the confines of the walls. Like Eliza was saying, like, do you know your ABCs? Can you count? Well, what happens when, like, you were saying to zip your pants up? What happens when something falls down in the kitchen and you're with, your family, instead of like the parent swooping in, or whoever's in the house swooping in to fix the problem? Just, looking at like even my 2-year-old and saying, like, what should we do? Just involving them in being more independent and more, capable of being like, wait, I can solve this problem. Oh, this could be fun. How many different ways can we solve this? And kind of gearing kids at a very early age to want to learn, to want to investigate, to want to improvise. And then you also, to Eliza's point, you build a pre-social skill of not kind of getting so anxious about feeling like you have the right or the wrong answer. Because I think that's a lot of we don't realize that kids are learning all the time. And half of the battle of then going to school is kids unlearning this fear of being wrong. So at a young age, I feel like, my parents were great at always being, inventive and creative and kind of whimsical. So there was always in the back of my mind, I could always imagine another option, as opposed to like, is it A or B, or is it right or wrong?
Yeah. That's good. And because essentially what you guys saying is that there has to be a balance. You have to cover all areas, and it's not just about knowing how to write or spell or count or add, but those life skills. And I see Wanda Williams who says that she's a parent coordinator in New York City school system, and she says that she sees many students come in with no life skills at all. So yeah, that's huge, and something that we as parents should not overlook, but include that in what we're teaching our children at a young age. That is so good. Years ago, when the Cookie Man and I, when our children were very young, I noticed a significant difference when we went to parent-teacher conferences or PTA meetings based on where we lived. At one location, we'd go to a parent-teacher conference or PTA meeting, we could count the attendees on our hands, and there were very, very few men in attendance. Another place we lived, the attendance was so large that they had to have people out directing traffic. So what has been your experience, both personally and professionally, regarding parental involvement in schools? Rachel, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I actually get asked this question a lot because people have this strange opinion that I have some like magical thing that like I possessed in my brain that like allows me to magically have these really great genuine relationships with parents. And what I joke about all the time is I say, yeah, that's my lack of being a grown-up. That's what like I am a 40-year-old grown-up, but I don't interact with parents in a way that feels clinical or a way that feels like I'm an administrator or I'm a teacher or I'm a professional and you're a parent, because that can be very divisive. I always try and and I completely agree with what you said in terms of like seeing lines out the door versus seeing very little. I actually used to get made fun of. I teach in Camden, and when I was I would have like all my parents show up, and other teachers would be like, how come your parents are showing up and ours aren't? And it was more in just the way that I communicate with parents, in a sense of like having them feel valued. So like I'm not going to say like, this is my timeline and this is when we're going to communicate. Like I tell parents, and this is a personal decision, any teachers out there that are like, I'm not doing that, totally fine. But like I always say, like, listen, my phone's always on, like feel free to text me, I get it. You work all day, you're working at Family Dollar, and then your husband is trying to go to nursing school, and then blah 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 blah. Like everybody's got different schedules. So like when can I be available to you? Walking up to somebody in the parking lot when it's dismissal, I think a lot of parents kind of cage up because they're nervous about like, oh, did my kid behave today? Oh, why is this? And I'm always walking up with like a horrible dad joke. Or like if I see, like, I'll always comment on what they're wearing in a good, like, I'd be like, hey, I absolutely love your shoes. Where did you get them? Like, I'll completely like take it out of the relationship of like, we're two different people in a professional space. Like, no, we're two humans communicating. I'm going to tell you a joke. We can laugh about your shoes. Sidel just said, or a crazy costume. There are times when I've been dressed as a flamingo and had very difficult conversations about a student's potential suspension, and I'm legitimately talking covered in feathers. But I mean, I just feel like putting the humanity back in it and just being like, hey, how are you, mom? How are you, mom? How are you, grandma? How are you, dad? And getting to that first makes that person feel valued as a human. And then you can get to whatever you want to discuss when it comes to their child. But if you don't make them feel valued as a human being first, then like, how are you going to continue with that interaction?
Wow. That's good. And Wanda just commented, she said that unfortunately in the area that she works, that they have to attach student of the month to the PTA meeting to get more parents to show up. However, she's found that more parents show up for PTA virtually. I think that's good also. She says that her parent-teacher conferences are always well attended. That's great, Wanda. Eliza, did you want to add anything to that question?
Yes. It's so funny because I remember, you can never forget where you were, right? So I remember as that mom that was on welfare, right? And, I basically there were times where I was able to go and times where I couldn't. Like, Rachel had mentioned, you may be working, you may be doing different things. So like me experiencing that and knowing that, and especially, living in housing and things of that nature, and having to live through that, like I understand completely about parents not being able to make it, to parent teacher conferences. But something that she said was so key: you have to make yourself accessible. You have to be able to reach them. Okay, if I can't reach you in parent teacher conference, do you email? Do you text? And so like, I know for myself, I'm the same way, Rachel. I give parents, it's my personal choice, my number, because you may not be able to see an email. I've encountered parents who didn't even have an email. So you have to really meet them where they are. And it's so important to make them feel like they belong. The same thing with me. When I see, anytime I pick up my kids or I deal with a parent, guess what? I have a smile on my face and I'm complimenting you, whether it's on your hair, whatever, we're laughing. And, parents need to feel that, because we don't know what these kids are going home to. We don't know what the parents have to deal with. So even if they're in your presence for 5 minutes and they can just breathe, it gives them that sense of belonging. It assures them that this is a safe place, and they want to interact. And I know, like, through years of teaching, parents who were not able to come into the classroom, guess what? I assigned them jobs in the classroom. I had parents who were great at like taking pictures. So I would have them come in, take pictures. I would have them create, like we used to do CDs for the end of the year. I would have parents come in, do my bulletin boards, take down, because I know with pre-K, right, we had to rotate every month, right? We always have to rotate our bulletin boards, the pictures throughout the classroom. So being a teacher it can be challenging. There's a lot on our plate. So the things that I was not personally able to do and my assistant wasn't able to do, that's when I involved the parents. If I needed something cut out, guess what? I sent it home. I would say, who would like to, whatever. You had to see the amount of hands. Oh, I'll cut. That's still allowing parents to stay engaged in the classroom.
Yes, that's good. That's good. And I think Indira, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name correctly. If not, please forgive me. But Indira said that her mom showed up at every parent-teacher conference, and she also tries to show up. She says she gives her mom credit because English was her second language, and her mom's goal was for her to finish high school. Yes. Okay, great, great. So aside from looking at a child's report card, what is the best way for a parent to monitor their child's progress in school?
Basically, what I would do, I don't know if we lost Rachel, but
she's there. She just froze a little bit.
Okay, she froze a little bit. Okay.
I can hear you now. Look like you just froze for about 10 seconds, but you're back now.
I know something that I do as far as helping to monitor the children's progress. I would always, again, keep an open line of communication with the parents. Usually I would kind of like keep them updated as far as like how they're doing in classroom assignments or their tests, or anything to do with what's going on in school. I would always try to keep parents kind of like afloat as to what was going on, because I mean, I know for me as a parent, I have 3 children. I mean, 2 are now in school, but it's hard for me to know what they're doing, because I have one that just graduated 8th grade and the other one in high school, and they're not going to show me their stuff all the time. Right. So, it's a little, as a parent, it can be a little bit challenging. And I guess it really depends on the teacher, right? Because you have some teachers, my son, he has ADHD, and during COVID, he struggled. And so like he had a phenomenal teacher who called all the time to make sure that he was, doing okay, or to help him. And that's something that I do. I know personally, I have the children who have struggled. I have actually called them and set time aside to say, you know what, I'll sit with them for X amount of time and I'll help them with what they're struggling with. That's outside, that's past 3 o'clock, just to kind of help them, because sometimes it's kind of difficult. We have a certain amount of time that we have to, teach the children or be on some type of pacing. And, sometimes the kids don't get it at home. So it's like, and it's again, we never know what the parents are going through. Sometimes the parents may be working 2, 3, 4 jobs. They may be with grandma or grandpa, and they might not understand what's being taught. So it's like kind of teaching the grandparents as well as the children to kind of like, get an understanding of what's being taught.
Yeah, that's good. Rachel, did you want to chime in on that question?
Sorry, I was in and out technically. What was the question? I apologize.
The question was about, aside from a report card, what is the best way for a parent to monitor their child's progress?
I mean, I think just engaging with the child themselves. So I think sometimes, especially with like little guys, they feel like they're having like what I call balloon conversations in the parking lot, where like, you ever seen a kid like holding a set of balloons and the balloons are like super high above their head, where sometimes it's like the parent talking to the teacher and then the teacher talking to the parent. And sometimes I feel like the kid's like, hey, down here, like I'm the client, like I'm the cog that has to like turn and make these progress, like you were talking about, Eliza, like I'm the one who's progressing. So sometimes I'll purposely mouthpiece the child in conversation with the parent. So I'll say like, a parent will say, well, how's Jaquan doing? And I'll be like, Jaquan, how are you doing? And the kid will look at me like, what are you asking me for? Like, why'd you put me on the spot? And I'm like, well, because just like your mom is the expert on being your mom, you are the expert at being Jaquan. You are the expert at learning the way that Jaquan learns, and only Jaquan knows that. So I might be the expert in knowing how this random fancy math works, but in order to get Jaquan to know that math, I still need Jaquan's help because he's the expert on himself. And so I feel like treating everyone as though they are the expert of their own kind of mental domain makes everyone more available to learning whatever they need to. And then once that child feels like, hey, like, like I feel pretty important over here, like adults are directing questions to me, I feel like a lot of the distractions go away when you like let the balloons go, right? And you kind of like sometimes I'll literally crouch down so I'm like eye to eye with the kid, and that just tiny little adjustment in like position makes that student or child feel like, wait a second, like I'm really in this conversation. And what's interesting about that is, as opposed to a report card, which is just a letter on a paper, or like a dojo point, or those interactive online point systems, that the way that kid feels being present and involved in that conversation, they've just become their own broker. And they're going to be so much more invested in their own progress, knowing that they're the one that gets to present themselves, as opposed to just kind of hearing people talk about you. So that would be advice.
That's good. That's really good. I want to kind of piggyback on something that Eliza mentioned about teaching the parent as well as the child, because my mother was born in 1920 in Virginia, and she had perhaps a 3rd or 4th grade education. She wasn't even sure, because back then there was one big, huge classroom, and everybody from 5 years old to maybe 15 or 16 was in there getting all taught by the same teacher. And when my siblings and I, when we were in school, unfortunately, a lot of what we were learning, she was not able to help us with. Now, my mother, she was one of the smartest, wisest people on the planet, but she didn't have a lot of book knowledge. So how do you address that when a parent is unable, or maybe sometimes unwilling, to assist the child in their homework or school projects and what have you?
I got this one. I'm totally there for you. This is my favorite question. I love this question because I love watching parents that think that they don't know how to like teach, or that they don't. I mean, like, even I sometimes look at homework and I'm like, what? But my favorite thing is watching parents remember that they are so good at teaching, period. Everybody's good at something, right? Like, this is like one of the first things that I love talking to kids about. Everybody's good at something. People just don't realize that they're good at something because that something isn't valuable to like the masses. So I say, listen, if you're great at picking your nose, great, teach me. Like, if you're great at like, how do you do it? Do you insert the finger first? Is there a twisting motion? How do you get it out? You assess the color, right? Like, that's silly, and it makes people laugh, and it releases endorphins, and it gets everybody to just go, ah. So then I say, okay, Mom, what is your favorite thing to do around the house? I've had people say cooking. I've had people say sewing. I've had people say watch trashy TV shows. It doesn't matter, because anything that somebody loves to do has a process. So in that process, let's just go with cooking. I'll try and be a little bit more normal right now. Yeah, I could go down a bad path. I could give an actual example, but we're not gonna go there. So let's say it's cooking, saying, okay, well, when Mom is cooking, let's say she's making pancakes in the morning. What steps does she take? First, she has to mix the ingredients. Well, how does she measure the ingredients? There's like are there some hieroglyphs? Did somebody doodle? Oh, those are numbers. Oh, okay, we're gonna measure those. All right, then what's the next step? Wait a second. You mean you can't drop flour into the pan and it doesn't make a pancake? And the thing is, like, realizing and having adults realize, wait a second, I might not know, whatever they call it, 21st century math or backwards design or whatever newfangled, like whatever the homework scary gods have deemed it this month. Yeah. I may not know it by that name, but I know how to make a damn good pancake. Excuse my French. I know how to make a great pancake, and I can break that process down. And that's all teaching and learning is taking something and making it from some ugly unknown monster and then breaking it down into steps. So just going through that process with adults and saying, break something down that you know, and then telling them, now go to your kid and tell them to break something down that they know that you have no idea about. Have them teach you how to play the video game. Have them teach you how to turn on the video game. Have them teach you how to hold a basketball, how to shoot a basketball, how to dribble, how to do something on their skateboard, and then take those steps and apply it to the homework. What could we connect? Nobody has to know anything. Be inquisitive. Be organic in your thinking. Like, what can we connect? What do video games have to do with math? Well, wait, they both have numbers. Wait, we're learning addition. Wait a second. I actually use addition when I'm playing video games. Wait, we have to go through a couple steps to solve a word problem. Wait, I go through a couple steps every time I use my controller. Yeah. So I think opening up that dialogue and making it fun again, making it inventive, and reminding parents and kids, you do this every day. You're great at this. You just don't realize you're great at it because they're calling it something new. Name the thing something they already know. This isn't homework. This is video game 101. We're just going to add some math.
Wow. That's good. I like that. I think that's a great approach. Eliza, would you like to respond to that particular question?
I completely agree with Rachel, right? And then I have, my P3, right? I teach from pre-K to 3rd grade, right? Okay. So I know my kids, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, 8th grade math. I'm gonna tell you right now, I am not smarter than a 6th grader. Okay. I'm not. I'm the parent that says, let's Google it. And knowing that, and especially being a teacher, there's certain apps that we use to help teach us. So even when I'm putting my parent hat on, right? So even when I don't know it, we tap into those apps or those programs, and even YouTube, you can find everything on YouTube as far as breaking down, especially math, right?
Yes.
I would go through it with my kids and kind of like a deer in headlights. We're like, I don't know what this is, but all right, you get it. Okay. All right. Mission accomplished. But when it comes to my parents, I would explain, like Rachel, right? Whatever it is that you do, you're teaching. You just don't realize that you're doing it, right? And then it'll be something as simple as, like, take for instance, like now they want kids to learn like base 10 blocks, right? Where you're grouping things in 10 and you got to break it down. I said, listen, use some Cheerios. That's how I taught my kids. I didn't even know I was teaching before I was a teacher. I would take Cheerios and line them up and teach my kids how to add and how to subtract. Something as something as simple as that, which you don't think is a teachable moment. You just think that you're actually teaching.
Yeah.
To tap into what Eliza said, I think that actually that gets to the deeper question that I think this whole episode is about. Is in the beginning we talked about like those, you know, those life skills, those 21st century skills, and not just the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s. I think how adults respond when they don't know something is the biggest lesson that you could indirectly, directly, or inadvertently teach a child, period. So like, do you get all freaked out and say, I don't know, what did the teacher say? And like all of a sudden your like passive anger starts to show, your anxiety, all of that pent up, like, I didn't learn it this way. And, or do you say like, like Eliza was saying, let's Google it. Like, and then your kid is now learning from you. Well, what do I do when I don't know something? What do adults in the real world do when they need to solve a problem and they don't know the answer? And that lesson, that individual chunk, is the best possible thing you could teach them. And modeling how to do that relatively calmly, is even more important.
That's good. Listen, I was just talking to someone about that yesterday. I call it YouTube University, because if you can learn it on YouTube, it can't be taught. Go to YouTube I go to YouTube for everything. I might try Google, but to me, YouTube University is the place to be. So I absolutely,
you know what? And just to add on to that, right? So everything's like on YouTube. We have to understand the times that we're living in, right? Where it's like microwavable. Like what worked back in the day doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work now, right? So these kids want instant results. Even adults, they want instant results. So we have to understand that differentiated instruction is so imperative. It's so key, because one person may be able to be an audible listener and get it, while others need to actually see it happening. So even providing those resources like YouTube, right, where you're seeing it, you're hearing it, and you know what? Now you're also manipulating it. So it's like really knowing what's out there and how to utilize it is so important.
Yeah.
I was just going to say the last little piece, and Eliza keeps reminding me of these like little gems. Eliza, you and I are like, I feel like we're like Stockton and Malone here. Like you're like lobbing me these great reminders. I think one other thing is just, I tell teachers all the time, like when I'm doing workshops, but also parents, the smartest way to teach is to be dumb. I'll say that again. The smartest way to teach is to be dumb. I always play dumb when I'm talking with little kids, when I'm talking with teenagers, when we're learning something side by side. My favorite like way to elicit their response, especially with kids that are nervous or anxious that they're not going to get it right or that they don't know. It's hard to be in front of, like, have you ever been in front of someone that can, like, I don't know, calculate the tip in a restaurant without physically carrying the one? It's stressful. I'm like, I don't want you to see me like sweating over here when our tab was $10. So having that child be like, wait a second, you don't know it and I don't know it. So we're really in this together. And then even if, like Eliza said, you're watching a quick little YouTube video, on the content, sitting literally next to the child, both watching at the same time and then pausing it and being like, like, Jay, I don't understand that. And the kid's like, I do. And you're like, wait, what do you mean? Can you just, before we go on, can you tell me what you heard? Because like, I don't really know. And stopping at little moments in the explanation that's all like super nerdy, really like metacognitive stuff going on where you're having the child chunk and chew and process and all that fancy schmancy research talk.
Yeah.
But to the child, it just seems like they're the one digesting it, and then they get to teach you. So not only are they going to be more engaged, but they're actually learning it better. And all you have to do is be dumb. And I feel like that advice for parents is so refreshing. Like, wait, I don't have to know anything. I can be an amazing parent and an amazing teacher by being as stupid as I absolutely can try to be. Yes. Be dumb. Just sit and allow yourself to ask questions about the process.
Yeah. Wow. I'm telling you guys are teaching me so much stuff tonight. Wow. So I want to just shift a little bit, because there has been a lot of talk, a lot of discussion and around this particular topic that tends to be a little bit controversial to some. And that's the whole concept of critical race theory. So what are your thoughts on critical race theory as it pertains to our educational system? And either one of you can jump in on that.
You want me to start, Eliza, or you want to take it? So as the white woman present, I love to just, I tend to be a little defensive of all of my amazing children and students that I've taught in the past. So I've had to really, really work on not bulldogging other like living, breathing adults that like, I've had to work on like my own self-control and social skills, because I can teach social skills all day. And then, Sidel just goes, somebody will say, some other adult will say something about like, critical race theory. And I just feel the inner 7th grader come out of me. Like, flagpole, 3:00. Like, I just get very defensive. So I think one thing that I've learned, especially as a white woman advocating for this content and this conversation to be spoken about more within circles of the, whatever the statistic is, 96% of white women who are teachers, like the white women that are the majority of the teaching field, needing to be talking about this and needing to not necessarily feel so defensive, like they have to have a PhD in critical race theory, or they have had to, study every random fact about, African-American history. That has nothing to do with it.
Right.
Being able to just ask questions, being able to have a discussion where all voices are heard and where all voices are allowed to be heard. Start there. Like, just start there. And I would always, I don't know if hiding within that question was like, what do you do when someone is combative about it? Is I go back to that, like, deep breath in through your nose, don't make a fist, release, you know what I mean? And I just say, well, what are your questions about it? And I like allow myself to kind of just steer the canoe. My uncle is a lawyer, and I once had to have a conversation. I once had to attend an event where I was going to be around a lot of adults who did not share my same open political views. That is as nicely as I can put it on a mainstream. I'm being so well behaved, Valerie. I'm so proud of myself. And my uncle, who's a very calm, very very strategic lawyer, I said, like, how do you handle it? How do you handle having conversations with people that just don't understand and respect multiple points of view? And he said, a conversation, and this is one of the best pieces of advice I've gotten. I've given this advice to teenagers multiple times. A conversation is like being in a canoe. And a canoe has, if you are both in the canoe, all your job is to steer the canoe. Because if that person is doing everything they can and they're just like rowing and rowing, all you need to do is steer the canoe away from the rocks, right? Is to steer the canoe away from the parts of the conversation that are going to make people super, super volatile, and bring it back to like, where is this canoe going? What is the destination of the canoe? Because that's what we should be talking about. And if, you know, you want to attack the critical race theory, well, to help me to understand how that gets in the way of the destination of our canoe. And then hidden behind his advice was like, if you attack the other person in the canoe, you're both going under. And that's the hardest piece of advice for me to take personally. I'm still working on that. I'm still learning every day, you know, but I'll let Eliza jump in.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. I can see that you're very passionate. I know from personal experience, because I know you, I know how passionate you are. But that's one of the things that I love about you, actually. Eliza?
Thank you. Yeah, you know, one thing that's interesting is that I remember my kids were going to this charter school, and in the charter school, they didn't even know anything about, they never celebrated anything pertaining to Black History Month. And my kids are biracial, they're Puerto Rican and Black, right? Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I'm like, how could they not teach you, you know? Mm-hmm. And my thing is this, right? If you were in school, right, a lot of things have been swept under the rug, right? Where they don't want to address or they don't want to talk about. So it then leaves our kids as it leaves them wondering, like, what's going on? Why can we not talk about it? Right. What is the problem? And it honestly excludes them because, you know, the charter school they went to was predominantly, you know, white, you know, well-able. And then here you have tan skin, brown hair, you know, where we talked about in the beginning, belonging, right? Yeah. So how can kids feel like they belong if you're not talking about these things, if you're not addressing these things? This is part of who they are. This is part of their heritage. This is where they've come from. And to not address it is to say that they don't belong, you know? So
Eliza is completely 1,000% on the money. And I always bring it back to, like, let's talk about crayons. Like, when I get frustrated with someone trying to, like, make this about politics or make this about, you know, division, I'm like, let's talk about crayons real quick. Yeah. Talk about crayons. When you had to draw a picture of yourself in elementary school, let's talk about crayons. What color are you? Are you yellow? Are you black? Or are you orange? And someone will go, I'm neither. Like, I'm not black. Like literally like this background. I'm not orange. I'm not yellow. And I'm like, well, those are the only crayons we got in the box, bro. So what do you mean you can't draw an accurate picture of yourself that allows you to feel like you belong and you can, you know, talk and engage and be creative about stories, you know, that you're trying to tell as a 6-year-old. Now they have these amazing crayons that literally have every color of the rainbow. Yeah. And so I always bring it back when I'm talking to inclusively handicapped adults is my next way of talking about this group of people. If you are having trouble including people, let's talk about crayons. Have you seen these great crayons? It's so cool. They have like every shade. It's awesome. Kids can literally put it up to their arm and be like, ooh, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this. And then the kids have conversations. Oh, you're caramel. Oh, look, this says vanilla. Oh, wait, Miss Baker's not white. Miss Baker's beigey yellow. Hold on. We thought she was white this whole time. Wait a second. They literally have conversations about different shades. And I would start to talk to an adult about, like, how do you feel about that as an exercise? Just having kids have a new set of crayons. Now let's take that metaphor one step further. What's your problem with the new set of crayons? Now don't start it that way. See, Sidel jinxed me. She was like, oh, you're being so good. And there I just dropped the ball. But, you know, obviously don't start the conversation with what's your problem. But you know, just talking about having this great set of crayons, because most kids have had the experience of opening up that 64 color box of crayons. But those were crayons that were allowed to talk about colors like magenta and blue. And, you know, I remember saying, oh, I love this new color, azul. And my friend was like, that's blue in Spanish. And I was like, huh? Oh, it's so cool. I thought it was this cool new shade of blue. No, you're just talking about blue in a different language. But to someone that's never
Yeah.
had the conversation, you're learning a whole other set of ways to be inclusive. And it's all about things that have nothing to do with personalities. It's things. Yeah. Wanda just said construction paper too. She's exactly right. Like, let's open some options. And ironically, that was the alley-oop to the Big Brave broadcast, was when Eliza was talking about, like, what do you do when you feel like kids never feel like they are getting that, like, that ability to see themselves.
See themselves. Yeah. Wow. That's good. So
I know.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Eliza. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I was gonna say, like, part of, like, when I was a pre-K teacher, right? Part of being a pre-K teacher, we had to show a lot of diversity, and it wasn't simply on, like, just posting a picture, right? We had to have, like, structures, clothing, kind of like bringing that into the classroom, so that there was a sense of belonging, right? So that we could identify, listen, we are all different. We are accepted. We are different. So I think, keeping that in mind too. I mean, I know we're talking about crayons and construction paper, but also, what does the environment look like?
Yeah.
That also plays a major part. And something that we did a lot was, we celebrated diversity, whether it was, like an Indian culture, African American, whatever it was. We made sure that we incorporated that in the classroom, so that there was a sense of belonging and an acknowledgement as well.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
And I just feel like a lot of teachers were, especially, again, from my perspective, I talk to a lot of white female teachers, and there's this angst, like, well, what if I don't know? What if I'm like, do you have a mouth? Just quick question. Do you have a mouth? Yeah. Do you have ears? Point to them. Okay. That's it. Done. Course over. If you have a mouth and if you have 2 ears on your head and they work, you've got it. You have a set of kids in front of you. I don't care what grade, I don't care how old, I don't care how many. Ask questions about people's family, people's heritage, people's holidays, and then listen. That's it. And the thing is, like, I feel like so many people feel like they have to be prepared and they have to be this. No, be organic, be honest. If you don't know something, ask. Like, but I think just the asking, and then more importantly, just the listening. And like Eliza said, like, I guarantee you, she said she had mostly Indian students. If she had mostly students that were Latino, then she would have been doing a whole other set. It's just, who do you have in front of me? How can you meet them where they are? And how can you all belong in the same space with pride and purpose?
Yes. Wow. You know what? I could sit here and talk to you ladies for another hour or two. Okay. But I want to respect your time, but there are still some things that I want to cover. So, I was reading an article recently that indicated that so far this year that there had been 27 school shootings. And obviously we don't hear about them all because they don't all make the national news. But what are your thoughts overall on school safety, and what more, if anything, can schools do to ensure the safety of the students from your perspective?
You want to take it? You want me to take it?
It don't matter. You can go. Go ahead.
I'll try and be straight on this. I'm like, I need a one of those canes to like pull me off when I'm talking too long.
like the Sandman on
Exactly. I need like usually I have little kids for this. This is my biggest teaching trick, is have the kids that need the most behavior management manage you. And then they're so distracted by all the stuff that I'm forgetting, they forget to misbehave. I would say, I mean, so many people are worried about the outside of school shootings, right? Which is important, right? Access to guns and the political climate and the school safety and blah, blah. I mean, when we're talking about especially students that are the shooters and I have several students currently that have access to guns every day, that blah, blah, blah. I say, like, understanding the feeling of not belonging could make anyone at any point in their life feel like, I'm going to snap. And obviously, we all think like, oh my God, that would never be me. Oh my gosh, I would never do that to another human being. Sure. Right. Because we have matured, and our brains and our, life skills have matured to the point where we have those feelings, but they don't come to fruition in terms of action. A lot of the kids, especially teenagers and, even younger students, they don't have that yet. So I feel like our first line of defense, and by the way, this isn't like excusing any of it, but I feel like one of our first lines of defense is just understanding the power of making someone's day, of making someone feel like, no matter, I say this sometimes, like in workshops, I need you as a teacher, especially when you're talking about the students. People always use the word dealing with, right? Like, I'm dealing with this child, I'm dealing with this behavior. On their worst day, I need you to notice something that makes them still feel good. That makes them still want to come in the next day and feel like, you know what? I made every mistake possible, and you still want to love me and teach me, and you still understand me on a human level. Yeah. So I feel like when that, and obviously everything on the outside needs to come along with it, but I just feel like a lot of those trigger points, when schools can feel like safe havens as opposed to triggers, then that will go a long way towards that.
Okay. Eliza?
I completely agree with you, Rachel. I know, like, even in my experience, right, working at the Board of Education, I did second grade, right, and I encountered a lot of kids who have very low self-esteem. And even at that age, at second grade, I could recall a kid. I remember, I had asked them, what is it that you want to be? And one child in particular was like, he didn't want to be nothing. And I said, well, why not? And, and I just kept trying to like pull at him. And one thing that as a teacher, I always make sure that, I have even like motivational words, like, on the windows, everywhere around the classroom. We encourage, we uplift, we help one another. And so this particular child came out and he told me that his own mother said he would be nothing, and I was like, well, I don't believe that. Do you believe that? And he was like, well, I don't know. I said, well, what would you like to be? What is something you would like to do? And he couldn't answer that. And so I said, well, do you like playing video games? He was like, well, yeah. He was like, I love playing video games. I said, well, you can be a video game developer, just kind of like trying to help him understand that you don't have to stay there, right? So it's like, what we have to understand is, especially when, I work in an urban community, and a lot of things that we face are low self-esteem, right? Yeah. And poverty mindsets. And so to get children out of that poverty mindset is going to take work. It's going to take affirmation. I'm sorry, I have my clock going on in the background. But, it's going to take work. It's helping to develop their self-esteem, letting them know that they're not alone, right? Because it starts at that young age. Because if we don't instill that in them at a young age, you're going to be faced with problems as far as, facing gun violence and things of that nature, because I believe it stems from low self-esteem. Yeah. So it's like we have to target those areas. Yeah. We have to make sure that, when they come, I tell my friends all the time, like, being a teacher, it's not just teaching them. You're not just teaching them like, math and ELA. You're teaching them social skills. You're teaching them, how the value and worth, and giving them those tools at a young age is going to help them. And honestly, not a lot of teachers are like that. Some may be in it for the paycheck, but then I believe, for me, that's why I know I'm called to do this, because I'm not just going to teach you your ABCs. I'm not just going to teach you how to add, but I'm going to teach you to love yourself. I'm going to teach you when you get into a confrontation, the right way to do it. You know, just because somebody does something bad doesn't mean you do something bad back. No, there's a better way to respond. And I think a lot of children, I know for myself growing up, I was always taught, if somebody mess with you, you better make sure you beat them down. But it's like, we were always taught that. We were always taught to react. We weren't taught to talk it through. We weren't taught to say, let's fix the problem. And that's, as a society, we're lacking so much. Back in the day, it took a village to raise a child. Nowadays, nobody wants to talk. Nobody wants the village to talk to their child. Right. And that's why, we've come away from morals, come away from respect, self-respect. I mean, this can go like deeper, it's into the things that we're listening to, what the kids are exposed to nowadays, from media to music video. It's so much wrapped into it. I mean, we can't unpack it for sake of time, but it's like, as a professional, as a teacher, I know where I stand. And I know that, like, for me, I make sure that we're uplifting, we're encouraging, and we don't say I can't, we say I will. Just because you don't yet doesn't mean you're not going to get it. And so, just to have that mindset and that mind frame of really pushing kids for greater, pushing them to the point of them saying, wow, I was here, but now I'm here. Right. And really acknowledging the small victories in that, so.
Yeah. Wow.
I would just say I always think simplifying things is the best, because I think people sometimes leave these types of discussions, or teachers leave workshops, or parents leave, help sessions or workshops, and they're like, like, so much, I can barely remember like what's on my grocery list, let alone like some ways to do things differently. And so I always simplify things where, people are like, gun violence is so big, or making kids feel like they belong is so big. And I'm like, well, just see them, like, just see them. So like that same kid, like Eliza was talking about, that said like, I don't know, I'm not going to be anything. Or mom was saying like, you're never going to amount to anything. Or like I had a kid say like, my mom's only going to be a garbage man, or whatever. And I would say, they would say like I'm nothing. And I'd be like, well, you're something to me. I'm not important. Well, you're important to me. And it's like, just kind of like, kids are always taught not to talk back. And I think as a professional, or as a teacher, or just as a human, I always want to talk back to that like negative, nagging voice, especially in a kid's head, a teenager's head. And teens throw this around all the time. Like, it's just like trash. Like I suck. And I'm like, no, you don't. I'm like, why? I actually had a teenager say like, why do you always say that? Like, just let me say I suck. Like, I'm sorry, you're wrong. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's because they don't expect someone, when you're like at a grocery store, how you doing? Good. How are you? And we just throw these like verbal exchanges back and forth like oxygen. Like, we don't even hear what we're saying. We don't hear what the other person says. We're just kind of taught to interact that way in society. Well, I'm not going to do that with you in school. When you say I suck, talk back to that. I'm going to say, no, you don't. Or I'm going to question you. Why? Let's have a discussion. And he's like, because I suck. Yeah. Here's 3 things you did yesterday that were brilliant. One of them was telling me that I was wearing 2 different shoes. Continue, and we'll have that discussion. Just see them, little kids, smile at them. Make sure you stop someone and say, no, hi, I see you. I got you. And the last thing I would say would be, I had little kids catered to in a whole school building in Camden. And I would walk around and I would do the same thing. And I would say like, you have a superpower that everybody has and nobody has. You can make someone's day right now. Everyone in the world can be negative. Everyone can say, this sucks or that sucks or I'm not good enough. But you yourself, you can make someone's day, and you can do it in a million ways. So I would have kids brainstorm with me in the morning. How could you make someone's day today? You could do it with a thumbs up. You could do it with a wink. You do it with a silly face. You could do it with a wave. You could do it by saying their name. How many times a day can you make someone's day? So like to boomerang off of what Eliza said, you know, kids that are taught like to react, I would say, yes, I want you to react. I want you to react to the parts of the day when someone feels like they're not enough. And I want you to make their day. You always have the power.
Yes, yes. Wow. Like I said, we could go on and on and on. But one thing I want to make sure I do is I want to celebrate the two of you dynamic women. And I want to talk about some of the things that you've done. And Rachel, I want to start with you because I remember your big, brave broadcast that you had. It was right here on YouTube. And I'm going to try to show an excerpt of that just for a couple of minutes. Bear with me, guys, okay? Because, hold on.
Here's your beautiful daughter.
Well, actually, it's going to have her on there.
There you go. There it is.
Okay, I have to share screen. Hit share screen. Window. Where can I find it? Chrome tab. Oh, there it is right there. Okay, let me share that. So you guys can see that, right? Hold on. Can you guys see that? Good. Okay. Oh, let me go back and play it. Hold on. I hope it plays.
Great job, Junior Detectives. You guys found the feelings word. You found the word confused. But I don't know what that word means. Who can we go to tell us what that word means? That's right, Grandmother Nature. And now to Grandmother Nature with Feeling Words Weather.
Whether you're feeling happy or whether you're feeling sad, whether you feel surprised or whether you're feeling mad, whatever the weather, we'll face it together, however you're feeling today.
Oh, man. 7 and 3. A 10. I got it. All right. 5 and 5. That can't also be 10. What the? Hi, guys. Welcome to the Feelings Words Weather. I'm your Grandmother Nature, and I'm so excited to see you guys. I heard that you guys found the feelings word. Do you remember what it was? Sorry, trying to do this math. What's that? Confused? Well, you know, I gotta say, that is quite the coinkydink because I just happen to be extremely confused about these partners to 10 friends, whatever you're gonna call them. I don't understand how, like, 7 and 3 can equal 10, and 5 and 5 can also equal 10, and 4 and 6, and it's very confusing. Anyway, I wonder, wait, what's that? It's a bird. It's a plane. It's La Valiente Bilingüe.
La valiente, 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 bilingüe, sharing her superpower de dos lenguajes. La valiente, 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 bilingüe.
Soy yo, la valiente bilingüe. It is I, la valiente bilingüe. Y yo tengo el poder de hablar en dos lenguajes.
Okay, let me stop sharing and come back over here.
That is my true personality. It's a 84-year-old woman.
So that's just an example of a small example of what Rachel did on her Big Brave broadcast, which is available. You can find it here on YouTube. There were a lot of episodes. So Rachel, tell me, what was your motivation for doing that, and how did you come up with that format?
My motivation for doing it was just that I wanted I wanted my kids in Camden, New Jersey to see themselves in a positive, powerful, purposeful light every single day. So like, instead of just like, you know, coming to school and like learning to read or learning to write or having to walk in line or doing this wrong or do it, like, I wanted first thing in the morning for kids to be able to laugh and smile. And a lot of the things that we did, hi baby, including my 2-year-old, a lot of it was, and ironically, you played the clip with me and with your daughter Sidel and with Sandra, who is a teacher, a bilingual teacher, but also having Jaquan, who is a student. He's now a freshman at Rutgers University. He's from Camden. He actually went to that very school. He was this character, Detective Ortiz, and it actually started that way. It started with Jaquan being, you know, he was someone that was super shy in the beginning, but, you know, having him be the forefront, having him be the mouthpiece. So it wasn't always, my goal with the show was, you know, I started it during quarantine, so I had to tap into my like 17 personalities and do a bunch of characters. But eventually, you know, we bring Sidel in, we bring Lutfi in, we bring Jaquan in, we bring, you know, having other people, making sure that everyone can see themselves in some way, shape, or form, or someone that looks like them. And then talking about today's top story, which was either a fictional story or more than likely a nonfiction story about someone in African-American, Asian, Latinx heritage, and talking about the cool things they did, and not just being like, George Washington Carver invented the peanut, like not just looking for those like random postage stamp facts, but talking about like, you know, great inventors, great athletes, things that like maybe they didn't really know, you know, Frida Kahlo, and talking about how she took something that was potentially, you know, the way she looked and made it and embraced it. And then, you know, being funny with it and having, you know, jokes. And then the kids, my favorite, if anyone is watching right now, go to some of the later numbered episodes, because the kids, I started involving the kids in it more and more. And the kids would then interview back and forth with the professor, and they would go back in time and they would physically teach the professor about these people in history. And so it was great because the kids, towards the end, the kids got to be really excited that they literally were seeing themselves on the big screen in their classroom, and they were the purveyors of knowledge. They weren't just like, you know, this free air type, like, you know, empty bucket to be filled. They were the ones actually doing the teaching. So you know, that was my motivation, was to give them the power and to bring the purpose and to make sure that it was really positive. I don't know why I'm saying only words with P's. You know, and to just enjoy it and see themselves more. And yes, I agree, we do need to bring it back.
And I also want you to talk about your book. Rachel has a book. And I hope I got everything on there right, because, you know, I told you I'm not a great typist, but you can show the book. That'll.
All right. This was a while ago, but this was basically my, I was trying to call someone's bluff that kept telling me like, you know, oh no, it's just your personality. You're just good with kids that have behavior problems. And I'm like, what? Like, okay. But like, this was me trying to prove that like anybody can do this, as long as you actually want to do it. Like Eliza said, like some teachers, you know, if you're in it for the paycheck, this isn't the book for you, because you have to actually want to connect like a human with another person. But what I basically did was I tried to make it as concrete as possible. So literally, like if you're a parent and you're like, what do you mean social skills? I don't know where to start. Like this was like some therapist-y, you know, having like, this is tone of voice, and putting Ryder, who is an African-American young male who is now like an amazing wrestler and is 1,000 times smarter than I am. But, you know, he's the one in the picture, not like some random graphic, and then breaking things down step by step. For teachers or parents that were like, I really want to process with kids, but I don't have the time and I can't pull them out of class and I'm teaching. You know, having things like a vent sheet, which is what I call like a 2-dimensional social worker that you can photocopy, you know, and just giving kids a space and a place to process. So that's all it is. It's just concrete strategies that are made to feel really usable and really not, it's all based in research, but it's meant to read like really, really like a human to another human. like,
Okay.
you know, the best way possible. So,
And where can that book be purchased for those who are interested in getting it?
So it can be purchased on Amazon or through Roman and Littlefield. I think the best way to do it is just to go on Amazon, click it, and then it gives you a bunch of different options.
Okay. Now, let me change this here. And Eliza, I want you to tell us about your books. We'll start with the first one, Rags to Riches, Tearing Down Strongholds and Generational Curses that shouldn't be plural, while meeting and reconnecting with God. I told you I'm not a good typist. Forgive my typos. Tell us about your book.
So basically, this is my first book that I've wrote. I'm a self-published author, so there were times that I had to go back and kind of like re-edit. So yeah, it basically talks about my personal journey walking with God and kind of like talking about the things like, you know, that are swept underneath the rug. You know, a lot of things that happen, things that you could go through that are swept underneath the rug. So that's basically my personal testimony, the beginning of my personal testimony.
Okay. And I would imagine that this one is the continuation of it, Riches to Glory, Fighting the Good Fight of Faith. So tell us about this.
So yes, this is the continuation. And I based this book upon boxing, right? Because my father and I growing up, we never we always bumped heads, right? He and I used to be two hotheads, you know, and when it came to coming together, we will always bump heads, but we would always find a way to come together, which was through boxing. And so, you know, he would tell me, okay, you know, so and so is up. You know, my favorite person was Mike Tyson, you know, and so we used to just love sitting down and just watching boxing. So I basically created this book using boxing terms and just kind of like, you know, fighting through life with faith.
Good. That's good. And this last one, tell us about this one.
So this one, it's so funny because I try to take a shortcut with this one. I tried to make it into a 14-day devotional. And I was writing it. I never forget it. I was writing it down. I was like, oh yes, they were just coming, right? And I was like, oh, that's great. Okay. And then I said, it's going to be 14 days. And because I try to do a shortcut, it was like I saw a hand go, erase the entire devotional. And then I heard the Lord say, stop trying to take shortcuts. There's no shortcuts in it. So yeah. So this devotion is basically, I would basically take a scripture, give a little excerpt or summary, and just a little prayer to go along with it, because we know 21 days develops a habit.
So, right. Yeah. Wow. Hold on. I think I messed up something here. Give me a minute. Go back to the banners. There. Okay. This has been rich. This has been so rich. And I hope that those who listen, who watch this evening live, or those who may watch later, I just hope and I pray that you were able to get something out of this. Now, obviously my children are grown. I've got grandchildren who are part of the school system. So this is information that as a grandparent that I need. And those of you who are out there, listen and take note to some of the information that was shared on this evening. So I'm going to ask either one of you, or each of you rather, if you have any final words that you'd like to share with parents, with teachers, with educators, with whomever. You have the floor. You get the final word.
Eliza, do you want to?
I can
you want me to start?
Yeah, you can start. That's fine.
I'm gonna quote one of the best teachers that I know, which is my mother, who was also a P3 teacher, and did a bunch of other things. But she's got a great short and sweet piece of advice that I think is great advice for just teachers, but also humans, parents, anybody, which is give joy, which sounds really hokey. But it's actually an acronym because, you know, we're educators, gotta love a good acronym. So the joy stands for just offer yourself. And it's something that I've always taken really seriously. And I feel like I try and bring to every single day that I'm in the classroom or at the Wawa, you know, just doesn't matter where you are. If you're offering yourself genuinely and truthfully to another human, whether you're a teacher or a parent, or like I said, just somebody standing in line at the Wawa, offering yourself can be listening, offering yourself can be making someone's day, can be smiling at someone, seeing the good part of something bad, or just seeing someone, period. So that would be my advice, is just keep it simple, right? And just offer yourself.
Great. Eliza?
I love that. I'm gonna use that.
Yeah, that's Elizabeth Kendall. So Eliza, you've written 3 books. Elizabeth Kendall is way overdue in writing her book, Just Offer Yourself. So I'm gonna need you to
really
21-day devotion her to writing this book.
I would say community, right? Community is big. We can't do this without them. And, you know, at the end of the day, you know, I tell my kids, like, I spend more time with my students than I do with my own kids. So it's like, I'm a teacher, I'm a parent, I'm a nurse, you know, I'm everything wrapped in one. And so it's like, you know, I know for me, I know that every child that I touch is like, they come out and they tell me, can I go with you? I said, no, I got my own kids. I don't need any extra, you know, but like being that community, because we can't do this without them. If there were no kids, I mean, we wouldn't be teachers, you know, we wouldn't be able to impact them. So that's one thing that I stress a lot, you know, with my parents, and, you know, being available, you know, wanting to be touched, wanting to be reached, you know, because the difference between, you know, you have parents who just don't want to be reached, but then if something happens with their kid, now they want to talk. No, we need open lines of communications. You know, like, we didn't have to get to this point if there was communication. Right. So in order to have communication, you have to build community. There has to be a sense of belonging.
So ladies, I want to thank you again so much. You took your time out and shared from, not just from your knowledge and your experience, but you shared from your heart. And that is absolutely priceless. So thank you again. I appreciate you. And those of you who are watching, make sure you subscribe, like, and share. I always forget to say that because your girl needs some more subscribers. Okay, I'm just keeping it real. All right. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I'll see you next time. So I think next week, let me look at our calendar. I forgot what we are going to be talking about on next week. Oh, okay. Next week, we have a couple on talking about life after retirement. So join us for that, life after retirement. If you're already retired, or at some point you're going to be retired and you need to plan for it. Okay. So join us next week and we'll cover that topic. Good night, everyone. Thank you again. Love you guys.